Salesforce.com page, which had all these funny little cartoon characters all over it, and I was like, "Well, I don't know, maybe."
Hello and welcome to episode 125 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is the marketing and the F is the well you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from techie to CMO and trusted advisor, and each week I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share with you some marketing street knowledge that I hope will inspire your inner rockstar. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode was recorded on Friday the 29th of July, 2022. Thanks for joining us. I hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. On this week's episode, Jeff Clark is back in the marketing studio. I chat with PR expert and Vice President of Next Tech Communications, Michelle Andersen, and we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with a thought from Robert Rose over a cocktail. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark. Jeff is a sought-after advisor, an experienced marketing leader, and former Forrester Serious Decisions Research Director. This week, we plan to brand. Welcome back, Jeff, to the newly rebranded...
The studio.
Oh, yeah, the studio, the marketing studio. Right. So there's something we need to work on there, doesn't it? The brand.
Yes.
Brand resonance, specifically the brand resonance in the host of the podcast.
Well, and you want to make sure that your brand is memorable.
Yes.
So if you can't remember it, there might be a problem.
All right. Anyway, welcome back, Jeff. And it sounds like we're going to be talking about brands some more,
Yes.
since I need to learn something about it in the marketing studio. This needs a little jingle, doesn't it? The marketing studio with Jeff Clark.
I'll work on that so I can come in with a little da-da-da-da-ba.
Yeah, get your guitar out. The marketing studio with Jeff Clark. Okay, so Jeff, last week we chatted about the kind of branding fundamentals, really, didn't we? And we do love a fundamental.
Yes. Fundamentals around naming, in particular, naming company
right.
or products or services. Yep.
That's right. And we covered off the fact that, particularly in B2B, where you put your focus, whether you put your focus in your products or your brand. So anybody who missed that, I'd encourage you to go back and listen. Jolly good show. And this week, we're going to dig into the process of, if you are looking at how to name, if you are going through a brand naming activity, right? What sort of process should we go through on this? And surprisingly, I mean, you'd think, wouldn't you, that it's not very often that you actually go through a brand naming process. But actually, in my career, I've done this a number of times, because it's not just your brand, but it's also the product stream, or it could be a solutions package, or it could be your support or your professional services. I mean, very often we as marketers are creating these little brands.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, you've been in product marketing roles. I've been in product marketing roles. That's probably where I was most involved in the naming process, a little bit in more of a corporate marketing role. But yeah, and it's and you certainly want to include a broad range of stakeholders in this process, which we'll get to. But yeah.
So and because I pay attention to our preparation, I understand that, and we love 5 steps, that we have 5 steps for your brand naming process.
5.
Correct? And it's not because then I can say things like 5 effing steps. I mean, that would just be
Because you could say 4 effing steps.
That's a good point. Yeah,
Or
we'll have to work on that one.
6 sexy steps or something,
So we got 5 steps. And we need to name something. We need to give something a brand. Where do we start here with then,
So
Jeff?
where you start is understanding the resources you have to work with, because I think that and this is kind of true anytime you get into a campaign planning or marketing planning or strategy session. It's like, what am I working with? And the thing that's unique about a naming process is that, one, you want to have access to whatever your country's trademark office is. In the United States, we have the U.S. Patent Trademark Office. They're the ones that handle if you're trying to register any kind of a brand name. They're the ones you go to. You may want to have a legal team help you with that. I know when I was at a couple of global software companies, we had internal intellectual property legal staff that handled anything that had to do with patents, trademarks, naming, and they were particularly good when, if you're a global company and you're thinking about, okay, I may eventually have to apply for this. I'm in the U.S. I may eventually have to apply for this in the U.K. or the Eurozone or Australia or whatever. They become particularly helpful. Sometimes, if you're a small company, like one of the companies I'm working with right now, where we're trying to trademark something that we've been using for actually like 15 years or so, then we go to an outside counsel that does patents and trademarks, intellectual property law. And then when you go to them, they'll want to know, so what product classification are you doing this for? Because obviously you come up with a name that somebody in a restaurant business might use, but you're in software and it's like, who cares? But that'll be one of the things you want to have defined and understand going into the process. You may want to bring in a creative agency. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, or sometimes you don't have the money. But I know my first couple of forays into brand naming and product naming, we did use an agency that was kind of a nationally well recognized agency that helped with branding, naming, and I certainly learned a ton from them. So if you've got the resources, bring them on board. And eventually, we'll get to this, but eventually you'll want to have a brainstorming team. So identify who are your stakeholders, people that may, want to have an opinion or when you name this and they'll go, what the hell were you thinking about? You want to make sure that they're involved in the process.
Right. Is there any danger there of losing something sometimes when you have like a committee trying to do something? I mean, just a thought there. I mean, that's always the challenge, isn't it? In creativity.
Yes, and absolutely. And I think a couple of the steps we have coming up will help you, prevent there being a danger from, committee think, whatever you call it, group think. And but it's obviously something. It needs to have alignment, because it has to do with the brand. So therefore, you have to be aligned with certain key elements within the organization, or otherwise, it's not going to fly.
Right. So that's number one. So we've sort of corralled what resources we have. We haven't done anything yet. So when you're talking about USPTO, or maybe I'd think about we need to check whether .com's there and that kind of stuff. We're not doing any of those things. We're just making sure we're identifying what resources we have once we've kind of decided on this brand, or how we decide on this brand. So what's step number two?
Step number 2 is build the creative strategy, your brand strategy that's behind what you're trying to name. So whether it's a product, a service, or let's say you're getting started as a new company, and you're either trying to create a new brand name for the company or rebrand to another name. You definitely want to have a strategy, and this is, I think, one of the things that helps to prevent the downsides of groupthink is that, let's make sure we get on a piece of paper. It may be a couple of pages or whatever, but it should be concise. It's like, okay, what are who's the audience we're after here, and what are the needs that we're trying to address? So, who's the audience who's driving decision making? What are their needs? What does the product or service we're providing solve? you want to be very clear about that. And again, you want everybody to agree with that. You want to take an input about what's the company's, brand vision, if it's articulated, if there's a mission or vision that's already been articulated, that's like, let's plug that in. Let's at least assume for this point that we're not drafting those, that those are things that are that were done in another process, and we're bringing them into this process. Then who's your
and in the past,
go ahead.
Hang on, just on that, in the past, you and I have talked about brand attributes, haven't we? About what it is that people think about us, or we want people to think about us. Is this what you're also talking about in terms of articulate your brand vision? So it's well understood, and that would also help with the putting some guardrails around this creativity, right? Is that somebody may come up with a really goofy name, you're like, really, goofy isn't one of our brand attributes. Right. You know what I mean? We're straight laced. We're this. I mean, it might be that you're goofy. It depends.
It could be
selling a kid's yogurt or something like that. Then maybe, but if it's a financial services solutions package, then perhaps goofy isn't the way it goes.
Well, so, I'll just a quick sideline on that point, because one time I interviewed with a company, and actually I won't divulge who they were because I can't remember who the company was, but they showed me something. They were kind of in the U.S. arm of a global company, and they were like, look what our creative services team put together, and it was a very they wanted my opinion on it. It was a very cartoonish depiction, illustration or whatever that was part of some campaign or something like that. And they were like, is that what we really want to be? And then very soon after that, I looked to the new Salesforce.com page, which had all these funny little cartoon characters all over it. And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe that wasn't a bad idea. Anyway, that's definitely a sideline. But yes, and so when you're certainly thinking about your brand vision and mission, you would want to bring into that any kind of research that's been done about what people think about you and is the brand vision and things you've been articulating, your attributes. Are they what the market views, or are you off on you're on that's what we'd like to be, but that's but that's not exactly what we are today.
Aspirational, because
it really comes important with another part, which is, well, who's the competition, and as part of this, you want to be able to develop kind of a unique value proposition statement that it's like, we, the company, are providing this product, and this product, is in this market against these competitors, and here's our unique value proposition. That's one of the things that's kind of a summation in your creative strategy, because it's going to encapsulate in a statement what when you start going through the ideas of brand names and stuff like that, you got to bring it back to that and say, does that sound like something that really, fits to the value proposition we think we have?
Yeah. So that's the why you, and that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Sometimes with these conversations is you're trying to fit into a category so that people identify you in the right category, but you want to be differentiated in that category. So that's really that why choose you, against your competition. That's good. So what else have we got to think about in terms?
The other thing is that you may have we always term mandatories. So are there certain, obviously, if it's a product or service, are there certain colors as we're depicting it, typefaces, visual treatments and stuff like that? Is there something that's important we need to pull from an existing brand? Are we going after something that we would want a unique URL for? Most products in a business, you really don't care about that, because it's a sub URL to your own corporate brand. But if you've got a real big campaign that is going to have unique landing pages and stuff like that, thought leadership or whatever, then you may want to make sure you've got that in hand.
Plus, you don't want. I mean, it might not be something you'll use in your web strategy, but it might be you want to prevent people from squatting on it, right? So if you've come up with
be another reason to try to take ownership of that.
All right, so those are the first two steps. So we've looked at what resources we have available. We're then building that creative strategy, or hopefully pulling together resources again of something we've already defined, hopefully, right? But so pulling together that creative strategy. And then what's the third
brainstorming.
Step?
This is like the fun part. We've kind of referred to this earlier. I mean, you want to think about who are your stakeholders. I mean, if I'm in product marketing, do I have somebody from product management? Do I have somebody from, sales, communications? So who, and you want people in, certainly for brainstorming, you kind of think about core groups and extended groups. So there's people who you're going to have involved in the process, and then there'll be people who maybe need to be informed. So like, it's always tough to get somebody from sales to be part of a process like this, but you might be able to get somebody from sales operations or training or something who's core group, but then they've got to inform the rest of the sales team about what's going on.
In B2B, and I might be slightly biased because I come from a pre-sales background myself, but I think many good product marketers start their career in pre-sales because that's when you first learn to tell the story about your product. You're often creating demos. You're on the coalface of that. Now, when you say brainstorm here, and then you're talking about people's different roles, it almost sounds like a racy model. Like, these are the people that are responsible for coming up with the ideas. These are the people that are going to be accountable. These are the people we need to inform. And I can't remember the series.
Absolutely. You can.
Is it like that? Yeah.
You can certainly.
So when you say brainstorm, you don't mean get everybody in the room at the same time. You mean there's a core group that are going to come up with the ideas, but they need to be socialized in a responsible way around some key stakeholders.
So because your core group, you're going to sit, and so what I had done is had like do 3 meetings of where you've got an hour, and certainly part of the first part of the process is here's the creative strategy, and so is everybody on board with the creative strategy? Hopefully you got that input beforehand, and then and then it's like, okay, let's come up with names and throw them on a board, and then at the end of every session, kind of pick rating and pick the top candidates. So you bring those forward to the next session, and ultimately at the end of the last session, you'd say, okay, we went through 3 sessions. We came up with, I'm just going to pull a number out of the hat. We came up with 5 or 15 names. Let's narrow that down to a small list of candidates that we can start to start to vet. And this is actually my step 3 as you may see, is going into a little bit into step 4, which is selecting the leading candidates. And the reason to kind of think about this as a separate step is that you want to make sure that you're picking names that are that communicate something to your customers. And there was a quote I ran across when I was doing some little bit of research on this. It says a great brand name is not just something that looks cool on your business card or fun to say. It's great, and it isn't great because you like it. It's great because it communicates something to customers. So keeping it simple and easy to communicate, particularly if you're a company that has to deal across various languages. One of the things, and actually, I'll hold my comment to when we get into the next step. But it's like you want to make sure that you are creating something that communicates around whoever that audience is, however broad that audience is in terms of languages, markets, positions in the customer, etc.
So that quote there, I'll include in the show notes. Who's it from?
It's from Katie French, who wrote a blog about this on Column 5 Media.
Okay, I'll take a look at that and add that to the show notes. So far, we've got all our resources together. We've built and shared the creative strategy. We've done the brainstorming. We've selected our leading candidates. What's your 5th and final step?
The 5th and final step is to vet your brand name. And as I say this is actually the steps to get to the brand name, and then you've got to obviously go through and implement the uses of it. But it's like you've got to be able to vet it. Customers, focus groups, depending on how important it is. Industry analysts. I mean, I've found industry analysts incredibly helpful in providing feedback because you've done your work on what the customer needs are and who they are and the competitors and your differentiation, blah, blah, blah. And you've come up with all this. Well, your industry analysts have done all the same type of work for different purposes. So if you say something to them, we think this should be called, ABC, and they go, whoa, where did that come from? Now, it should be said that you can't, one negative comment, whether it's from a customer, whether it's internal, whether it's from an analyst, you've got to look at the totality of feedback. You shouldn't just take one piece of feedback and go.
And I found with these kinds of discussions, and I'm going through some of that again as through my CMO day job, is people are very good at, and it's often with all sorts of strategy things, people are very good at coming up with the edge case, aren't they? But what if this thing happens? And it's like, you've got to be able to have the capacity to discount some of the negative feedback, the edge cases and stuff, and just try and bring this thing forward. The interesting thing I think as well about that engagement of industry analysts is because you're going to need to take them through this process, right? So therefore you end up having a conversation about your brand attributes with them, about your product strengths with them. There's no harm in spending more time with an industry analyst discussing your product and service. Is there? And also they think that they're being invited in the tent, and they like that too. So it's an excellent way to engage.
Absolutely.
With
and then they'll give that feedback when they're talking to customers who are getting advice from them and saying, we're interested in certain solutions, and they say, boy, ABC company is really, they're developing something I think you'd find interesting. They may not divulge what names and stuff are, but it's like they've gotten the inside scoop. So it's always helpful to do that.
And they've really thought about it, and they've got some expert help on board, i.e. me. The analysts never mind being name checked in that way. They have a little ego sometimes.
A little?
Yes. So, all right, so those are the 5 effing steps to brand naming.
and the 5th step, if necessary, the 6th step, if necessary, would be if you're creating something unique and you need to now file it with the trademark office, then you go ahead and file it. But if you're creating something that's, even though you're going through this process, but you're going for something that's descriptive, not unique, then that is not necessary. That may not be necessary.
Well, your advice last week was to go descriptive.
Yeah, for products. Products and services are best descriptive.
Yeah. All right. Well, I did forget one piece of the agenda at the beginning. I didn't really ask you how you were while I press record, or how the weather is. How's the weather?
It's hot but bearable. We here in New England have had some hot weather, but it's not as bad as the rest of our country. So we're thankful for that.
Jolly good. And here has been fairly similar. Just normal summer's day, nothing crazy. All right. So the third agenda item, you need to come up with a song that matches these 5 effing steps.
I came up with the song Pride by U2. Pride in parentheses, in the name of love. So, you want to have pride about your brand. It's, and its names. Now, the song happens to be about Martin Luther King, but we'll put that aside because it's just a great song, and
and it's got name in the title.
And so therefore it works as well as it has to. But yeah, it's a great song.
That's going to be my pleasure. So we'll play out with Pride in the Name of Love by U2 from 1984. Love that. That is an absolute classic. And we're hitting the 80s classics, aren't we, every week? So this is
we've slunk back into the 80s.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And will you be in the marketing studio next week? Excellent. Well, I look forward to it, mate. I'll see you then.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jeff, and another 80s classic there. Pride in the Name of Love by U2, of course, from 1984. And if you'd like to chat with Jeff, get in touch. I'll include all his links in the show notes, or drop us an email at hello@rockstarcmo.com. Right, on to our guest. Michelle Andersen is a marketing communications professional with a career spanning more than 20 years. It started as a music publicist, working with Lawrence Welk-owned Vanguard Records, and evolved through working with consumer technology brands from the dawn of the internet, a stint in philanthropy, and now deep into the next iteration of technologies like IoT and Web3. As you'll hear, her work and career have been led by her passions, almost always involving music and technology. Michelle recently joined Next Tech Communications, a women-led agency born from the Bliss Group, as vice president. I enjoyed chatting with Michelle. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Michelle, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ian. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and talking with you on the podcast. So
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. And we know each other for a little while because you keep recommending great guests to me. So this is excellent. Thank you very much. And where are we talking to you today, Michelle?
I am in San Francisco, and it is weirdly raining, even though it's like 90 degrees on the rest of the planet, if not 100. So,
Well, you seem to have picked up on our obsession with the weather on this show, so well done. I think we're
Yeah.
going to get along. So for people who don't know you, Michelle, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, basically, I'm a marketing communications professional, which sounds way too like overdone, considering I'm kind of like a rock and roll PR person. And that's why I instantly related to your show, because I'm like, I am so rock that that this appeals to me. But yeah, so 20 years of marketing communications experience, and mostly in technology, some in music in the very beginning. But it's been a wild ride because everything is developing. All the technology is developing exponentially, and it's always a pivot and a shift as I move through my career. So.
Yeah. And you've just started a new role, haven't you? So tell us about this new role.
I did, and it is so cool. Well, I've been recently named vice president at Next Tech Communications, and this is a new PR agency that works with the marketing teams at technology companies. It was born from the Bliss Group, which I think is fairly well known for its financial and VC client communications. And what they did was they spun off a technology division with headed up by this woman, Janine Severis, and she is amazing. And I've only been there a week, but it's just having the Bliss Group and their guide rails, their onboarding, everything has been amazing, and really just a really together company, and the team members are amazing and wonderful. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, splendid. And it sounds like Next Tech focus on tech, so by their name, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Cool.
So it's really focused on like we do some financial and VC stuff, but it's in relation to verticals, and as the verticals are maturing and using the digital marketing channels much more, we need to have more of a technology focus added to the accounts and to what their businesses are doing.
Yeah. And you mentioned just a moment ago, and I love this because so many of our guests have some musical connection, and it seems they gravitate towards Rockstar CMO. So what you talked about starting with music, but you were a former DJ, weren't you?
I started DJing at our college radio station, KXLU in Los Angeles in college. I knew the first thing I would do would be to march up to the radio station and start DJing, because I've been DJing music for people since I was like 6, making them listen to things that I loved, and it was always ingrained in my whole life. So the first job I had, though, you'll get a good laugh out of this, was with the Lawrence Welk Group. So Lawrence Welk was my first employer. He was still alive back then, and I was brought in to work with Vanguard Records. And I had decided I wanted to be in the music industry, and I was a communications major at Loyola Marymount University. So that started everything, and I went in and I built their internal communication systems, working with the marketing and sales teams, and their computer systems and databases and materials, and everything. It just sort of blossomed from there.
And you've had a fabulous career, and it sounds like maybe the answer to my next question is in that sort of transition from music to marketing, but. You've had a fabulous career, and you started with a well-respected agency in San Francisco, as you were just saying. So what inspired you to get into marketing in the first place from your time at university?
I think it was because when I was in college as a communications major, we were studying. I was studying media, and what I recognized at that time, because I was promoting clubs like dance clubs and promoting music on the radio. And what I realized was all of the different marketing channels were just it was just very interesting to me. I could get music out by being a DJ on the radio. I could go see bands and then tell people about it afterwards. And and knowing all of the different mass media communication channels, it just really, I don't know, that stuck with me, and it influences me to this day. That there's TV, there's radio, there's and now we have, the internet and beyond. So it just sort of came. It was a natural evolution. I feel like I was probably kind of entrepreneurial, which led to a lot of solo work, independent work.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about being independent in a moment, but I also know from our chats that that music and marketing came together at Yahoo, right? When you were working there.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I was hired at. It was basically one of the best agencies in the world. After I wanted to get into technology, I wanted to get out of music because the digital, the Napsters of the world were starting to be born. And what I saw in the music industry, and the reason why I didn't want to continue there, why I wanted to go into tech, was because they were limited in their vision of what this would end up being. And I knew that they were going to ultimately fail the artists at that point. So I started getting into technology, and they hired me because I had the publicist and music background. So I started working on music technology through them.
Yeah. And didn't you? Who did you work with at Yahoo? Wasn't that?
Oh yeah. So I was working with and they were my favorite. They were my favorite marketing group that I've ever worked with. The Yahoo's marketing groups, and I worked with almost every business unit in there, and the product marketers and all of that. And they were probably the best. They were so good at marketing, and so I got to work. For example, I worked on Yahoo Entertainment, and my favorite project ever was the Weezer tour. Mm-hmm. And Yahoo, it was called the Yahoo Out Loud tour with Weezer. They ended up providing the platform for them to sell 500,000 tickets for a national tour that sold out in minutes. And I got to tell Rivers Cuomo that he had to let the Rolling Stone photographer, into his dressing room to take photos, or else.
Yeah. Wow. And how did that go?
He acquiesced eventually.
So far your career, there's a lot of music here. There's a lot of marketing going on as well, a lot of PR. If I focus a little bit more on the PR side for a moment, what do you think makes a good partnership between an organization, specifically the marketing organization, and PR? I mean, we've had people on the show before, and I'm going to talk to you about what you want to throw into the Rockstar CMO swim pool in a minute. And somebody said, get some PR on that, right? It's a very misunderstood discipline. So what makes a great partnership?
Well, I think it's understanding the point from the marketing perspective of when it needs to go from grassroots, the marketing stages that they decide, when it needs to go from grassroots and through social media and through influencers. And then PR is not necessarily the first way to go for the marketing team. To be a good partner, and I come at it from a PR agency perspective, because that's what I've always, almost always done, is from the agency perspective. And we have a lot of clients that don't understand PR, don't understand how it fits in the overall marketing mix. And they think they know. And being a good partner is listening to our counsel. We have 20 years, or more, sometimes 30 in tech communications, and we've seen companies come and go. So, what somebody at Real Networks once said to me, though, very condescendingly, he said, PR is just the redheaded stepchild of marketing.
Wow.
And, talk about slapping me in the face. So I set out to prove him wrong. And in my mind, I was able to, because, I have a line into the CEOs for counsel on their vision, oftentimes more than even the CMOs do.
Yeah. So what do you think is, so what's the magic parts that we need to put together? So clearly PR has this kind of, and also PR's changed a lot over the years, hasn't it? So what do you think is the essential synergies that we need to work on as a marketing team working with a PR agency?
Well, I think it's the marketing team, and it's got to be the whole company, though, and understanding the market, how they can use PR in the marketing mix, and not being abusive to agencies and thinking that the only purpose of a PR agency is to get them stories. Because what we do is we provide counsel, we run brand sessions, and we provide, sort of like counsel on their image and their vision and all of that. And they need to, and I feel like if they at least listen to the PR agencies and understand that they are a big component and can help the marketing teams immensely, and not just treat them like a publicist, like a story generator.
Right. So PR is no longer just well, I don't know whether it ever was, but it should not be considered just to be the distribution channel. It's actually part of the sort of building that brand strategy, the stories that you want to get told before thinking about the channel that you're going to tell it over, right?
Yes, and we often have a very huge influence. Some of the most strategic people I know, they talk about communications rather than PR. Because oftentimes it's internal with the teams and advising companies on where they fit within the industry or how to blaze a new trail, and where to go with that, especially, and give them a heads up of like, these are the obstacles. Have the vision to say, these are the obstacles that we're encountering in the market, and these are how we can position you to overcome them, or be a leader, or be a part of we used to call it the horse race, when it was the search engines with Yahoo and Ask. So
really you've got your finger on the pulse of the zeitgeist of what's going on, so that you can help people jump into those particular topics or stories or needs in the market as they come up, right?
Yeah, and from my position, I do it by analyzing media, and by having a finger on the pulse of what is being talked about in the news, and what the analysts are saying. Sometimes people forget that the analysts are a really important part of the whole mix, because they will advise you on your product per se, in the same way that PR can do it, and come from a more I guess credible perspective.
Yeah, and I see that as one thing, to be honest with you. If I'm putting together a marketing team, is influencer marketing or influencer relationships, PR and AR, really you're trying to achieve many of the same objectives, aren't you? You're trying to influence somebody, or trying to get somebody to pay attention to you, to tell your story, right?
Yeah, and one of the things about analyst relations that have changed a little bit is because there are more digital channels, and I won't go too deep into that, because it's a whole nother conversation.
And we will have that conversation.
Okay, good, because I have my opinions about all of these things. But with the analyst relations, they are often acting a lot like media outlets, because they're doing more blogging, and they're doing more briefs. They were always quoted by media, but now they're doing more proactive, from my view and my opinion. They're doing more proactive communications on their own of their opinions and their findings. So what you used to say to the analyst, for example, it was off the table, this is background, is not so much happening anymore.
Well, which is part of the value, isn't it, that a tech vendor can provide an analyst, is they're looking to feed off those sort of anecdotes from customers and the things that support their point of view. And I also think it's interesting there where you're saying that analysts are becoming media companies. I mean, isn't everybody becoming a media company? So I think the expertise you have there is much needed. So go back to your career. I got a bit carried away there about the relationships in marketing PR, which I think is so essential. But a big chunk of your career, you've been independent and you've done fractional roles. And it seems to be something that we're hearing a lot about now, that the marketing teams need to be made up of fractional folks. And a lot of people are choosing that as their career. And it seems to be related to the COVID theme of things that we're talking about. A lot of people have decided to go out on their own and do stuff. So for people who are listening that decide to do that, and you've got that experience, what advice do you give to people who want to go independent?
Well, the first thing, my first reaction was, don't do it, but
don't do it.
But because I like being associated. For me, I've done it for many years, and it was partly because it's hard to answer this. Why did I do it? I was just entrepreneurial, and I wanted to create my own path. In terms of other people doing it, you have to be prepared for the back end. You have to be a credible source for these people, and to be able to prove that. A lot of times we are the cobblers who have no shoes, and you have to be able to to tout yourself and make your own shoes.
Right. So you need to do PR on PR.
Exactly. And you also have to be prepared, though, and this is the pitch of it, is for things like paying quarterly taxes, and dealing with the IRS, and buying your business equipment, and dealing with the internal organization of your own entity, and be your own tech support and all of that. And sometimes and getting new clients, and and filling all of the roles for them. It's really hard. I was working with for a while. I was working with a lot of British tech companies, and I found myself working around the clock and sleeping for 2 hours at a time, because I had to do absolutely everything. I just don't recommend it unless. But some people just don't want to be chained down or accountable, and that's understandable as well.
That was not the answer I was thinking I would get. I thought that there would be like, yeah, go for it, kids, but no, don't do it. It's hard.
Let me just say this though: I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade that time for anything, and the growth that you can achieve during that time. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And you have to be a really entrepreneurial person in order to do that.
Very cool. All right. Well, I'm going to wind up to our last question, and hopefully you'll like this question a little bit better than that last one. We have a regular feature on the Rockstar CMO called the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, our portal to marketing hell for all the overhyped trends, BS, and snake oil from this marketing industry we love. What would you like to see chucked into our pool?
Okay, so I may get into trouble for this because
these are the best kind.
I know. I'm all about throwing. I want to throw the TV in the pool. I want to destroy hotel rooms. I've done it. I've done it before. No, I'm just kidding. But okay, Facebook, Meta. And my friends at work there will probably kill me. But here's my beef. I've seen surveys that I don't think they're out yet, but Facebook is still the number one marketing channel. So you have to pay attention to it. But branding themselves as Meta. So maybe it's more that I'm complaining about the branding. Branding yourself Meta is akin to calling yourself the ocean. Okay.
Yes.
So there's more than one metaverse out there. There's going to be multiple metaverses, and we have to look at interoperability. And I think Facebook is pushing the metaverse down our throats in terms of using that particular channel as part of your overall Facebook strategy. And I think it's too soon. I think that it won't have credibility until it grows more. But naming yourself, Meta is. I just feel like there should be a law against it, isn't there?
I think the problem with Facebook, isn't it? There's so many things there should be a law against. Their name is the last in a lot of people's list.
I know, but I always think about the branding, because that's what I hear about, though. I hear a lot about that. I hear a lot about the metaverse and what's going on there, and I have a keen interest, and I'm watching it from a marketing perspective. But I'll tell you, can I tell you a secret before?
Nobody's listening.
That people don't realize that NFTs, which people are laughing at them because of the Bored Ape debacle and Yacht Club debacle. NFTs are one of the new marketing channels. So a way of engaging with audiences.
Well, that and the digital, the disruption of digital and PR, I think two big topics there we should have you back on.
All right. I would love to talk more about those.
No, so that's been splendid. And a new sort of feature that I don't usually do with the interview, but as a former DJ, I can't deny you. I understand that. What is it that gets your marketing mojo working? What song should I share?
Oh, the band The Black Angels, a US band, have a new single out. I'm totally promoting them, and I'm not being paid to do so. And it's called Firefly.
All right.
It's an amazing song, and I think that it's pretty universal. Has a very universal appeal. So.
Good. I'm going to play out then with Black Angels' Firefly. Is it like from this year, 2022?
Yeah, probably just a few weeks.
Wow, that'll be the newest song we've ever played on this show. I can tell you that for sure. Right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me, and I have an open door policy, so feel free to contact me.
Splendid. And you're Michelle Andersen, the VP of Next Tech Communications, and I look forward to catching up with you again, Michelle. We've got some great topics there. Have a great weekend. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks so much, Ian. This was fun.
Cheers. Thanks, Michelle.
Make me want to suffer, girl. Make me beg and cry.
J'ai montré comment servir. Domination et défi.
Where'd you
Thank you, Michelle. And that was a little snippet of Firefly by the Black Angels. Michelle and I actually met as she introduced me to some fascinating folks that I've chatted with here. And I thought, actually, we need to get you on the show. Great story. And we will have her back to dive into PR in future episodes. I will, of course, include all her links and to Next Tech Communications in the show notes. Right, it's Friday evening. Time to wind down from the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and join my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, for a cocktail and a marketing thought. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, and welcome to, goodness gracious, the Noisy Bar this week. I think you've got some sort of tropical, like, is it a hula kind of dance, kind of a, it's a whole, like, the drums going on and the folks in full out, you know, it's a whole, it seems to be like a luau that you've got going on here of some kind. It's just, you know, it's quite noisy. I'm glad we're here. It feels like a party.
Yes, well, you know, we like to be agile here and test and try different things every week, and not quite sure yet what a luau is, but yes, we're doing one.
That's right. That's exactly right. Good luck with trying to find some of the sounds for that. I've just assigned you a little bit of homework assignment for the production of the show.
Yes.
We do have a lovely drink. It continues to be warm where I am, and so I'm still in the mood of summer drinks, and I've just been to a restaurant this last week. I am a huge fan of Cuban food. And I absolutely adore it. My favorite is the Cubano sandwich, which is just absolutely delicious. And I went to a Cuban restaurant this last week, and it reminded me of a great, wonderful rum drink, which of course is the classic mojito. And so we want to make a mojito tonight for us, which is just a classic, wonderful drink combining. So we're going to do just regular old white rum, this unaged white rum, some lime juice. And then, of course, you've got to have the muddled mint, right? So we'll get the muddler out of the bar and we'll muddle up some mint leaves. And again, as you've heard me say so many times, there is usually sugar involved here, but I find that you don't need the sugar to make it as sweet. The rum makes it sweet enough. But if you want to put a little bit of syrup or a little bit of sugar into the drink, you know, certainly that makes it sweet. And it's a classic mojito that way. Very refreshing, wonderful. I just basically double my rum instead of putting in sugar, but, you know, that's totally up to you. And it's just a wonderful Caribbean tropical drink, and fits very well with our little luau theme here. Yeah.
Yes, and I like Cuban food too. It's ages since I've been to a Cuban restaurant. What's the stew? Is there like red? It translates to red clothes or red rags or something. I don't know. I can't remember what the dish is, but I do like a bit of Cuban as well. Lovely. Anyway, I'll attempt to make. I've probably got that completely wrong, haven't I? I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But I'm going to start with some ice. And I'm going to look at the ingredients on my desktop bar and select Hendrick's Gin. I think this is the closest and the most English of all of the rums.
Nice.
I should have rum on my desk, shouldn't I? But yes, that's a little bit of that. And then what are we putting in there to make a mojito, did you say?
There would be a little bit of muddled mint. So you have to break
Muddled
out the muddler,
mint.
which I'm sure you have very handy.
Yes.
And
Let me look for that.
Yes, and then of course the other part of it is your mojito is it's the lime. The
lime.
Yeah.
Yes. Jolly good. Well, I'm rather fortunate because the reason why I don't need a muddler on my desktop bar is because the good people of Fever Tree do the muddling for me.
I see.
And they like to muddle a bit of cucumber into some tonic water.
I see.
And make it very simple for me to make one of these very fine mojitos with the nicest of English rums and most refreshing of lime and mint muddled, cucumber. Let me give this a try. Oh, that's delicious, Robert. That's really nice. I could drink one of these every week.
Yeah, very nice. I think you might.
And what we call we're calling that a mojito, are we?
Yes, that would be the classic mojito.
Jolly nice. And aside from, I don't know, are we going to Cuba with this? Where are we going to go this week?
We are going. Well, and it's on my bucket list. So, yes, I have a. It's been obviously. As an American, it's been very difficult to get to Cuba over the last, 2 decades. More than that, really. It's gotten easier of late, but still is no small endeavor to get there. But I think that's where we need to go. We need to go to Cuba and basically hang out on a beach and drink some mojitos and enjoy the Cuban lifestyle and enjoy some Cuban food. I think that would be the key there.
Yeah,
I would give us a specific place to go, but I just don't know of any specific place to go.
Yeah, and you can just picture it. I mean, I think when me and my wife were living in the US the first time, so this is like 20 years ago, and nobody from America could go, but we could, right? But we never went for some reason. It was on our list, and I think we ended up going to Miami instead or something like that. But it was... somewhere that me and my wife have always fancied going to. So I love that idea. So we're in Cuba. Hopefully, all the things we think about Cuba are true. The old American cars and all that good stuff, and the lovely rum, and the cigars, and so we're enjoying all of those things. And conversation turns to marketing, as it does sometimes with us, Robert. What are we going to talk about?
Well, this week we're going to talk about how exhausted we are. we're going to take a little bit of a thing. Basically, here's the thing. Didn't somebody say 2022 was going to be better?
Yes, they did, definitely said that.
Basically when it's just tough, right? One of the things that I've noticed, however, basically is this: there's a weird kind of fatigue right now that's going on. There's lockdown and there's, pick your doomsday scenario of what's going on. Climate change, court decisions, all the kinds of things. That you've got, and what happens is that our first intuition is to manage expectations downward, right? To let people off the hook, right? In terms of when we manage our teams. And I'll give you an example of this. And this is really true anytime, but it's just maybe especially true now, which is, I was talking with a client last week, and they were talking about a struggle with a writer on his team. And he basically, they said, he continually produces work that just isn't good enough. I'm not sure what to do. And I said, well, have you considered raising the expectations for the writing quality with this person? And the client said, well, no, I'm just trying to get them to first base. If I can get a basic piece out of him, I'll count it as a win. I've been trying to manage his expectations about where he fits in. And that was sort of the clue for me, which is, so I've been in consulting 35 years now, and every single firm, big firm, small firm, et cetera, that I've ever worked in, whenever they say, they all talk about managing expectations, right? Managing your clients' expectations, managing your your colleagues' expectations, managing your boss's expectations. Managing expectations is the sort of core theme there. But here's the thing: in 35 years, that phrase has, managing expectations. That phrase has never meant raising expectations. It means lowering the expectations.
Yes.
And the thing is, the funny thing is, you go Google managing expectations, and you'll find variants of basically one piece of advice, which is communicate intentions clearly. And that's all well and good and everything, but basically, what we have to ask ourselves is, when we're managing expectations, is, am I communicating my expectations, or am I trying to lower theirs?
Right.
Because when we think about that, you think about a feeling like, you've got this innovative, cool idea, this team thing that you want to do, and it's all trying right now, and it's very pressure filled, but we've got this awesome thing we want to do. What's the first thing we do when we take that to our bosses? We go, well, let's damp down the excitement a little bit, because we want to manage their expectations, so we'll be sure that we meet them, right? Let's under promise and over deliver, we'll often say. And so the other side of that is that when we say, oh, we want to exceed expectations, well, that's flawed too, right? That's, basically, that's like, in Spinal Tap, when Nigel Tufnell basically goes, hey, well, this one goes to 11, and Rob Reiner goes, well, why don't you just make 10 louder, right? It's like, that's, basically, if you feel the need to exceed expectations, at least one of them, either your expectations or their expectations, isn't high enough. And so this whole thing is, of course, we have to make changes based on how fatigued we are in the current situations. We can reprioritize projects, we can delegate them out, we can assess the quality and alter the level of detail we need for our projects at the moment, balance the work across the team in a better way to account for personal stress levels. There are all things that we can do as managers, as leaders of teams. But the one thing we shouldn't do is to lower our expectations, right? And so when I was talking to my client, I was basically saying, instead of telling this writer that you're trying to get him to first base, tell them that you're expecting a home run, right? And you don't have to go for 11, right? You can go for 10, for whatever that means for both of you, but make sure that you're trying for the highest level you can, because then they want to do that. Then they would, if you raise your expectations to match your own, their expectations, you're going to get more of what you want. And that's just a helpful safety tip as we sort of navigate these troubling times.
Yeah, and and that's interesting too, especially with content writers, and because if they did get them to first base and they wrote something, well, what value is that, right? And then you're going to have all you're doing is putting off another difficult conversation, aren't you? Which is, that's not quite the thing. Oh, but I got to first base, right? You have to express the thing you're expecting, haven't you?
That's right. You've got to, it is clearly clearly setting the intentions, right? And communicating those. But more often it is, what I find is that if you set the expectations for everybody that, they're still high, our expectation for quality, our expectation for innovation, our expectation for creativity, we're all expecting to do great work. Well, one that helps you deliver, and there's actually a scientific psychological phenomenon there. It's called the Pygmalion effect, which basically, and research shows this, that setting high expectations for people propels them to better results. And so there is actually science behind that. So even despite the challenges we may face, we can adjust our expectations about what great high quality work is, and basically don't basically say, oh yeah, it's so totally cool if you do crappy work because we understand you're stressed. It's like, no, we still want to do great work, but what we want to do is in context with obviously the things that we need to do to balance people's psyche.
And I mean, I know that this isn't just about content, but you using that example I think that'll do is the reason why there's so much shit content, right?
That's right.
We've done it. The blog post is done. Done. And that's it. That'll do. And then on to the next thing, right? So that's the challenge, isn't it? Yeah. And it's much easier, isn't it, to say, well, that'll do and thanks, rather than say, actually, what I was looking for was this. And I think our customer is looking for this. It's not really that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good. So we're all exhausted. I like that idea. Certainly subscribe to that.
We all need a break.
But we all need a break. But on the other hand, we should still set the bar to do good work with this. That's cool. So Robert, where are you sharing such thoughts of this when you're not exhausted and you're setting your bar nice and high?
It's all about our little hovel on the web where we draw on the cave walls. It's called contentadvisory.net.
You've recently spiffied it up. You're going to have to stop calling it a hovel, I think. Anyway, so contentadvisory.net.
We've spiffed it up a little bit. Yeah, we've done some of the more modern techniques, as it were.
And then when people spin the dial on the internet and they want to talk to you directly, where would they go, Robert?
LinkedIn is the best place for me. That's where I love to spend my time connecting with people. But of course, Twitter as well. Twitter for the fun sort of short elements, and LinkedIn for more quality connections.
Splendid. And of course, I have to mention Experience Advisors, as I do, because it's such a fun community. How's that going? It's
going very well. Thank you for asking. It's experienceadvisors.io. And if any of you are consultants or brand managers and basically spend your life creating customer experiences or putting the strategy behind them, we'd love to have you over there. That's what the community is all about. Come on over to experienceadvisors.io and apply today.
Splendid. And I'll include a link to that in the show notes. But more personally important to me is, will you be in the bar with us next week?
I absolutely will, and I hope you get the luau sorted out. Yeah, this is great.
I have to Google what one is first.
Yeah.
But yes, excellent. I'm glad I've enjoyed that.
Nice.
All right, mate. I'll see you next week.
Absolutely.
Cheers, buddy. Bye-bye. Thank you, Robert. Setting the bar in the bar there, as usual. So that's a wrap on episode 125 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Michelle, Jeff and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello to them. I'll include all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com, where you can find all our previous episodes. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know on the socials, or drop a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff is back in the marketing studio. I go backstage with CEO of Loomly and Sendable, Caitlin Sorensen, and Robert will be back in our virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.